The sound of Elena's laughter drifting from the kitchen should have warmed my heart. Instead, it made my blood run cold because I recognized the voice on the other end of her phone call, her sister Vanessa, the woman who'd been systematically destroying our marriage for 3 years. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. Oh, Vanessa, you're absolutely right, Elena giggled, twirling her wine glass. Marriage is just a piece of paper. Real connections are what matter. I stood frozen in the doorway of our modest 2-story home in Millfield, still holding my laptop bag from another long day debugging software at TechFlow Solutions. The late afternoon sun streamed through our kitchen windows, casting everything in a golden glow that felt mockingly cheerful. David's so predictable, Elena continued, not noticing me. Work, dinner, TV, bed, same routine every single day. God, sometimes I wonder what I was thinking. My wife of 12 years stood there in her expensive real estate blazer, the one she'd bought after closing the Henderson property deal, completely oblivious to my presence. Her blonde hair was perfectly styled, makeup flawless despite it being nearly 6 p.m. She looked like she was heading out rather than settling in for a quiet evening at home. You know what? You're right. I deserve better. I deserve excitement. That's when I cleared my throat. Elena spun around, her green eyes wide with surprise. Oh, David, you're home early. Same time as always, I said, setting my bag down carefully. Who were you talking to? Just Vanessa. She ended the call quickly. Girl talk, you know how it is. I knew exactly how it was. Vanessa Morrison, Elena's younger sister, the successful art gallery owner from downtown who drove a BMW and lived in a penthouse apartment. The same Vanessa who'd been filling Elena's head with poison about our boring suburban life ever since she'd moved back to town. What did she want this time? I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral. Elena's jaw tightened. She doesn't want anything, David. She's my sister. We talk. Is that a crime now? Of course not. I opened the refrigerator, scanning for something to make for dinner. I just noticed you've been talking to her a lot lately. Maybe because she actually listens to me. She understands what it's like to have ambitions beyond this. Elena gestured around our kitchen dismissively. Our kitchen that I'd spent 3 weekends renovating last year. Our kitchen where we'd shared countless meals and conversations. Our kitchen that apparently wasn't good enough anymore. What's wrong with this? I asked. Elena sighed dramatically. Nothing's wrong with it, David. It's just predictable, safe, boring. There was that word again. Boring. It had become Elena's favorite adjective lately, usually applied to our house, our friends, our life, and most frequently, me. I'm going out tonight, she announced, already heading toward the stairs. Vanessa's hosting a gallery opening. Very exclusive. On a Tuesday? Art doesn't follow your corporate schedule, David. I watched her disappear upstairs, presumably to change into something more gallery-appropriate. This had become our new normal. Elena rushing off to various events with Vanessa while I stayed home, ordered takeout, and wondered when my wife had become a stranger. My phone buzzed with a text from my best friend, Mike Chen. Poker night Thursday, Jim's place. I started to type back, can't make it like I had for the past 2 months, then stopped. Elena's words echoed in my head. Real connections are what matter. Maybe it was time I started making some real connections of my own. I deleted my message and typed instead, I'll be there. 20 minutes later, Elena came downstairs wearing a black dress I'd never seen before and heels that probably cost more than my monthly car payment. Don't wait up, she said, kissing my cheek perfunctorily. These things run late. After she left, I sat in our living room, eating leftover pizza and thinking about that phone conversation. Something about it nagged at me beyond the usual complaints about our life. There was something different in Elena's voice, a secretive excitement that hadn't been there in our conversations for months. I pulled out my laptop and did something I'd never done before. I looked up Vanessa's gallery online. According to their website, there was no opening tonight. In fact, the gallery was closed on Tuesdays. My hands shook slightly as I set the laptop aside. Elena had lied to me. Not just a little white lie about where she was going, but a deliberate, calculated deception. I tried calling her cell phone. It went straight to voicemail. At 11:30, I heard her car in the driveway. I pretended to be asleep when she slipped into bed, but I could smell unfamiliar cologne on her clothes and something else. The scent of excitement, of secrets, of a life I wasn't part of. The next morning, Elena was unusually cheerful, humming while she made coffee and checking her phone constantly. "How was the gallery opening?" I asked casually. "Oh, it was wonderful," she said, without looking up from her phone. "Vanessa introduced me to so many interesting people. You would have hated it." "Probably," I agreed. "I'm not much for the art scene." Elena smiled, but it wasn't directed at me. She was smiling at whatever was on her phone screen. "I'm thinking of spending more time downtown," she said. "Vanessa thinks I could really expand my real estate business if I networked with her crowd. Wealthy art collectors, you know? They're always buying and selling properties." It made sense. It was logical. It was probably even true. So why did it feel like she was slipping away from me one lie at a time? That evening, I did something else I'd never done before. I drove downtown and parked across from Vanessa's gallery. The building was dark, just as their website had indicated. No opening, no event, no sister bonding over champagne and abstract paintings. I sat in my car for an hour, watching, thinking, and slowly coming to terms with a truth I wasn't ready to face. My wife was having an affair. Thursday night poker at Jim's house felt like returning to a life I'd forgotten I missed. The familiar smell of beer and chips, the sound of cards shuffling, the easy banter between friends, it was exactly what I needed. "Look who finally escaped the ball and chain," Jim Reeves said as I walked into his basement. Jim worked construction and had the kind of straightforward personality that cut through bullshit like a power saw through drywall. "Elena's out with her sister again," I said, settling into my usual chair around the felt-top table. Mike dealt the cards with practiced efficiency. "Vanessa's back in town, right? The fancy art dealer?" "Gallery owner," I corrected. "And yeah, they've been spending a lot of time together lately." "I remember her from your wedding," said Tony Martinez, our fourth regular player. Tony managed a local restaurant and had an uncanny ability to read people, a skill that served him well both in business and poker. "Real piece of work, that one. Always acted like she was slumming it with us regular folks." I picked up my cards, trying to focus on the game instead of the knot in my stomach. "She's successful, different world than ours." "Success doesn't give you the right to look down on people," Jim said, tossing chips into the pot. "I've worked on some of those downtown condos. Vanessa Morrison's got a reputation among the contractors." "What kind of reputation?" "The kind where she thinks money makes her better than everyone else. Treats workers like dirt, always complaining, never satisfied." Jim studied his cards. "And she's got a thing for married men, if you know what I mean." The cards in my hand suddenly felt heavy. "What do you mean?" Tony leaned forward. "My cousin worked catering for one of her gallery events last year. Said she was all over some guy while his wife was standing 10 feet away. Real bold about it, too." Mike shot Tony a warning look. "We're here to play poker, not gossip." But the damage was done. The seed of suspicion that had been growing in my mind for weeks suddenly sprouted into full-blown paranoia. I played terribly that night, my mind elsewhere, and lost $60 I couldn't afford to lose. But more importantly, I gained something, the confirmation that my instincts weren't wrong. When I got home, Elena was already in bed, but she wasn't asleep. The glow from her phone screen illuminated her face as she typed rapidly. "How was poker?" she asked without looking up. Fine. Lost some money. I started getting ready for bed. How was your evening? Quiet night in with Vanessa. We ordered Chinese and talked about life. Another lie. I'd driven past Vanessa's building on the way home. Her penthouse lights were off, and her BMW wasn't in the parking garage. That sounds nice, I said. Over the next 2 weeks, Elena's lies became more frequent and elaborate. Gallery openings that didn't exist, sister dinners at restaurants that were closed, shopping trips that produced no purchases. She was getting sloppy, overconfident, and I was getting better at catching her in contradictions. The breaking point came on a Saturday afternoon. Elena announced she was going to help Vanessa move some artwork to a client's house and would be gone most of the day. Big commission, she explained, already dressed and ready to leave. Vanessa's letting me handle the real estate angle if they decide to buy a new place. After she left, I called Vanessa's gallery. She answered on the second ring. Morrison Gallery, this is Vanessa. Hi, Vanessa, it's David, Elena's husband. A pause. Oh, hi, David. What can I do for you? Elena left her phone at home, and I need to get a message to her about dinner plans. She said she was helping you with a client today? Another pause, longer this time. I'm sorry, David, but Elena isn't with me today. I'm actually in Chicago for an art fair. I won't be back until Monday. My heart stopped. Chicago? Yes, I left yesterday morning. Elena knew about the trip. We talked about it last week. After I hung up, I sat in my living room staring at the wall, processing the magnitude of Elena's deception. She wasn't just lying about where she was going. She was using her sister as an alibi while Vanessa was out of town. That meant Elena was definitely having an affair, and it meant Vanessa knew about it. I spent the rest of the day in a strange state of calm clarity. The uncertainty was over. The wondering and second-guessing could stop. Now I just needed to figure out what to do about it. Elena came home that evening with an elaborate story about the difficult client and how exhausted she was from moving heavy paintings. She even had a small scratch on her arm that she claimed came from a picture frame. Vanessa's really grateful for the help, she said, settling onto the couch next to me. She's thinking of making me her official real estate partner for client referrals. That's great, I said. When does she get back from Chicago? Elena's face went white. Chicago? Her art fair. She mentioned it when I called the gallery earlier. I watched my wife's mind race, calculating, trying to figure out how much I knew and how much she could still salvage. Oh, right, she said finally. I meant I was helping her prepare for Chicago, getting things organized before she left. She left yesterday morning. Right, yesterday. That's when I helped her. Elena was a good real estate agent because she could think on her feet and adapt to changing circumstances, but she was a terrible liar because she'd never had to practice. So you helped her yesterday, not today. Today too. I was organizing things at the gallery while she was gone, for when she gets back. I nodded like I believed her, but we both knew the truth was out now. The question was what we were going to do about it. That night, Elena took a shower before bed, something she never did unless she was trying to wash away evidence. As the water ran, I checked her phone. She'd changed her passcode. The confrontation with Elena came sooner than I expected, triggered by something I should have seen coming: Vanessa's return from Chicago and her need to coordinate stories with her sister. Monday evening, Elena announced she was meeting Vanessa for dinner to catch up on the art fair. This time, I didn't bother pretending to believe her. Elena, we need to talk. She was putting on earrings in our bedroom mirror, getting ready for another fake evening out. Can it wait? I'm already running late. No, it can't wait. Something in my voice made her turn around. I was sitting on the edge of our bed, holding a small notebook where I'd been documenting her lies for the past 2 weeks. I know you're having an affair. The earring slipped from her fingers and hit the hardwood floor with a tiny metallic ping. For a moment, Neither of us moved. "That's ridiculous," she said finally, but her voice lacked conviction. "Friday night, you said you were at a gallery opening. The gallery was closed. Saturday, you said you were helping Vanessa move artwork. Vanessa was in Chicago. Last Tuesday, you claimed you were having dinner with her at Romano's. Romano's is closed on Tuesdays." Elena sat down heavily in the chair by our dresser. "David, who is he?" She looked up at me, and for a moment I saw the woman I'd married 12 years ago, vulnerable, conflicted, human. Then her expression hardened. "You wouldn't understand." "Try me." Elena stood up and walked to our bedroom window, looking out at the suburban street we'd called home for 8 years. "His name is Marcus. He's an artist. He's passionate and creative and alive in ways you could never be." The truth hit harder than I'd expected, even though I'd been preparing for it for weeks. "How long?" 3 months. "How did you meet him?" "Through Vanessa. She represents his work." Elena turned back to me. "David, I didn't plan this. It just happened." "Things like this don't just happen, Elena. You made choices. You chose to lie to me. You chose to sneak around. You chose to betray 12 years of marriage." 12 years of what? Routine? Predictability? When was the last time you surprised me, David? When was the last time you made me feel alive? "I thought I was making you feel secure, loved, protected." Elena laughed bitterly. "Protected from what? Life? Adventure? Passion?" We talked for another hour, but it wasn't really a conversation. It was Elena justifying her affair and me trying to understand how we'd gotten to this point. By the end, we'd agreed on a trial separation. Elena would stay with Vanessa while we figured out what came next. The hardest part was telling our friends. I started with Mike, calling him the next evening after Elena had packed her bags and left. "Jesus, Dave," he said after I explained the situation. "I'm sorry, man. That's rough. I just wanted you to know in case Elena's version gets back to you first." "What do you mean?" "Vanessa's got connections all over town. Elena's probably going to paint me as the boring husband who drove her away." Mike was quiet for a moment. "Look, Dave, marriages are complicated. I'm not taking sides here. I'm not asking you to take sides. I'm just telling you what happened." "Right. But there are always 2 sides to every story, you know?" That phrase, 2 sides to every story, became the theme of the next few weeks. Every mutual friend I talked to said the same thing. They were sorry about the situation. They weren't taking sides. Relationships are complicated. What they meant was, they didn't want to get involved. The first real blow came from Jim's wife, Sandra. I ran into her at the grocery store on Thursday evening, and she actually crossed to the other side of the aisle to avoid me. "Sandra?" I called out. She turned reluctantly. "Oh, hi, David. How are you doing?" "Fine." She looked uncomfortable, like she was talking to someone with a contagious disease. "Is everything okay?" Sandra glanced around nervously. "David, I think it's better if we keep some distance right now. You understand?" "No, I don't understand. The separation is hard on everyone. Jim and I just think it's better if we stay neutral." "Neutral about what? I didn't do anything wrong." "That's not what I heard." My blood went cold. "What did you hear?" "Look, I don't want to get in the middle of this, but Elena's been through a lot. Maybe you should think about what you could have done differently." Sandra hurried away before I could respond, leaving me standing in the cereal aisle wondering what lies Elena and Vanessa had been spreading. I got my answer that weekend when Tony called to cancel our usual poker game. "The guys think it's better if we take a break for a while," he said. "A break from poker?" "A break from the drama, Dave. Elena came by the restaurant yesterday with her sister. They were pretty upset." "What did they say?" Tony sighed. "Look, I like you, Dave. You're a good guy. But Elena was crying, talking about how controlling you've been, how you've been checking up on her, accusing her of things. Her sister was backing her up, talking about emotional abuse and manipulation." "Emotional abuse?" Tony, she's the one having an affair. I know what you told me, but she's got a different story, and honestly, she seemed pretty convincing. So you believe her over me? I believe there are two sides to every story, and I don't want my restaurant associated with any domestic drama. I'm sorry, Dave, but that's just how it is. After Tony hung up, I sat in my empty house and realized how effectively Elena and Vanessa had played this. They hadn't just ended my marriage, they'd destroyed my social life too. By painting me as the controlling, emotionally abusive husband, they'd made it socially unacceptable for our mutual friends to maintain contact with me. Everyone wanted to stay neutral, which in practice meant believing Elena's version of events and avoiding me like I was radioactive. The final betrayal came from Mike. We were supposed to meet for lunch on Saturday, but he called that morning to cancel. "Something's come up," he said. "Mike, what's really going on?" A long pause. "Dave, I think you need to get some help." "Help with what?" "Your anger issues. The way you've been obsessing over Elena's every move, tracking her lies, documenting everything. That's not healthy behavior." I was trying to figure out if my wife was cheating on me. By stalking her, by checking up on her constantly, by interrogating her friends and family. I realized that Elena had twisted every reasonable attempt I'd made to understand her behavior into evidence of my supposed controlling nature. "Mike, you've known me for 15 years. Do you really think I'm an abusive husband?" Another pause. "I think you're going through a hard time, and maybe you're not seeing things clearly." "So that's it? 20 years of friendship, and you're just going to believe whatever Elena tells you?" "I'm not believing anyone, Dave. I'm just staying out of it." After Mike hung up, I walked through my house, our house, and realized how completely Elena had outmaneuvered me. She'd cheated on me, lied to me, and then convinced everyone we knew that I was the problem. I was alone, friendless, and apparently branded as an emotionally abusive husband in the court of public opinion. But as I stood in my empty living room, something shifted inside me. The hurt and confusion began crystallizing into something harder, colder, and much more dangerous. If Elena wanted to play games, I was about to show her what a real game looked like. The confrontation I'd been dreading finally happened on a Tuesday evening 3 weeks after Elena moved out. I was grabbing dinner at Murphy's pub when I spotted Mike, Jim, and Tony at a corner table, laughing over beers like nothing had changed. For a moment I considered leaving, but something inside me, call it pride, call it stupidity, made me walk over to their table instead. "Hey guys," I said, trying to sound casual. The laughter died immediately. Mike looked uncomfortable, Jim studied his beer bottle, and Tony glanced toward the exit like he was planning an escape route. "Dave," Mike said finally, "how are you holding up?" "I've been better." I pulled out the empty fourth chair. "Mind if I sit?" The silence stretched for several seconds before Jim spoke up. "Actually, Dave, we were just finishing up." "Really? You just ordered a fresh pitcher." Tony shifted in his seat. "Look, man, this is awkward for everyone." "What's awkward about it? We've been friends for years." "That was before," Mike said quietly. "Before what? Before my wife cheated on me?" The entire table tensed. Jim looked around nervously, checking if other patrons were listening. "Keep your voice down," he hissed. "Why? Afraid someone might hear the truth?" Mike leaned forward. "Dave, you need to let this go. The separation is hard on everyone, but you're making it worse by..." "By what? By existing? By showing up in public?" "By refusing to take responsibility for your part in this," Tony said, his voice harder than I'd ever heard it. "Elena didn't cheat in a vacuum, Dave. Marriages don't fall apart because everything's perfect at home." I stared at him. "So it's my fault she's sleeping with another man?" "It's your fault she felt trapped enough to look elsewhere," Jim said. "Sandra told me about the grocery store, Dave. The way you cornered her, demanding to know what Elena had said. That's not normal behavior. I asked her a simple question. You interrogated her, Mike said. Just like you interrogated all of us. Just like you probably interrogated Elena every time she walked through the door. The accusation hit me like a physical blow. That's not what happened. Isn't it? Tony pulled out his phone. Elena showed me some of the texts you sent her. Want me to read them out loud? My stomach dropped. I remembered those texts. Desperate messages sent late at night, asking where she was, who she was with, when she was coming home. Those were just what? Just a concerned husband checking up on his wife? Or just a controlling man who couldn't let his wife have a life outside their marriage? The three men I'd considered my closest friends stared at me with expressions ranging from pity to disgust. You don't understand, I said, hearing the desperation in my own voice. She was lying to me constantly, making up stories about where she was going, who she was with. I had to. You had to what? Mike interrupted. You had to follow her? You had to check up on her every move? You had to document her lies in a little notebook like some kind of stalker? The fact that he knew about the notebook meant Elena had shared even more details about our private life than I'd realized. She was having an affair. So what? Jim said, his voice rising. Maybe she was looking for something she couldn't get at home. Maybe she was trying to feel alive again after years of being married to someone who treated her like a possession instead of a person. I never treated her like a possession. Really? Tony scrolled through his phone. Because according to Elena, you monitored her phone calls, questioned her about every social event, and made her account for every minute she spent away from home. That's not how it happened. Then how did it happen, Dave? Mike leaned back in his chair. Explain to us how a woman who was perfectly happy in her marriage suddenly decided to risk everything for an affair. I opened my mouth to respond, then realized I didn't have a good answer. The truth was complicated. Elena had been pulling away long before I started questioning her behavior. But in the court of public opinion, nuance didn't matter. What mattered was the narrative, and Elena's narrative was simpler and more sympathetic than mine. You know what the real problem is? Jim said, his voice getting louder. You can't accept that maybe you're not the victim here. Maybe you're the reason your marriage fell apart. That's bullshit. Is it? When was the last time you took Elena somewhere nice? When was the last time you surprised her, or made her feel special, or treated her like she was more than just a roommate who happened to share your bed? The questions hit home because I couldn't answer them. Elena and I had fallen into a routine over the years. Work, dinner, television, sleep, repeat. I'd thought that was what marriage looked like. I'd thought stability was what she wanted. Elena needed excitement, Tony said. She needed passion. She needed to feel like she was living instead of just existing. So she found it with another man. She found it with someone who appreciated her, Mike said. Someone who made her feel alive again. Someone who didn't care that she was married. Jim slammed his beer bottle on the table. There you go again. Everything's about you, isn't it? Your marriage, your betrayal, your pain. What about Elena's pain? What about the years she spent feeling ignored and taken for granted? I didn't ignore her. You took her for granted, Tony said. You assumed she'd always be there no matter how little effort you put into the relationship. And when she started looking elsewhere, instead of asking yourself why, you turned into a detective trying to catch her in lies. The worst part was that some of what they were saying was true. I had taken Elena for granted. I had assumed our marriage was solid without putting in the work to keep it that way. But that didn't justify her affair, and it didn't justify the way she'd systematically destroyed my friendships. Even if all of that's true, I said, it doesn't excuse what she did. She lied to me for months. She made me think I was going crazy. You made yourself crazy, Mike said. Elena just tried to find some happiness while you were busy being the world's most boring husband. That was the moment something snapped inside me. You know what? I stood up, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. You're right. I was boring. I was predictable. I worked 40 hours a week to pay for our house and our cars and our life, and then I came home and tried to be a good husband to a woman who was already planning her exit strategy. The entire pub was watching us now, but I didn't care. But here's what you don't know, I continued, my voice carrying across the room. Elena wasn't just having an affair. She was planning to leave me anyway. She was just waiting for the right moment, the right excuse, and her sister was helping her every step of the way. Dave, sit down, Jim said urgently. People are staring. Let them stare. Let them hear about how Elena and Vanessa spent months planning this whole thing, how they turned all of you against me before I even knew what was happening. Mike stood up too. You're making a scene. I'm telling the truth. But you don't want to hear the truth, do you? It's easier to believe that I'm the bad guy. It's easier to take Elena's side because she's prettier and more charming and she doesn't make you uncomfortable by asking you to actually think about what happened. Tony grabbed my arm. Dave, you need to calm down. I shook him off. Don't touch me. Don't any of you touch me. You made your choice. You chose to believe a cheating wife over a friend you've known for years. You chose to abandon me when I needed you most. We didn't abandon you, Mike said. We just didn't want to get involved in your drama. My drama? My wife destroyed our marriage and convinced all of you that it was my fault, and you call it my drama? I looked around the table at the three men who had been my closest friends, seeing them clearly for the first time. They weren't just staying neutral. They were actively taking Elena's side because it was easier than dealing with the messy reality of the situation. You know what the funny thing is? I said, my voice dropping to a deadly quiet. Elena played all of you too. She used your desire to stay out of it against me. She knew that if she got her story out first, you'd be too uncomfortable to hear mine. That's paranoid thinking, Dave, Jim said. Is it? Then explain to me how all three of you heard the exact same version of events. Explain to me how you all came to the exact same conclusion about my supposed controlling behavior. Explain to me how you all decided to cut me off at exactly the same time. The three men exchanged glances, and I knew I'd hit the mark. Elena and Vanessa didn't just destroy my marriage, I said. They destroyed my friendships too, and you let them do it because it was easier than standing by someone who was inconvenient. I threw a $20 bill on the table. Dinner's on me. Consider it payment for 12 years of friendship that apparently meant nothing. As I walked toward the exit, Mike called after me. Dave, wait. I turned back. What? We're still your friends. We just think you need help. I looked at him for a long moment, then smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. No, Mike, you were my friends. Now you're just three guys who chose the wrong side in a war you didn't understand. I left Murphy's pub that night, knowing I'd burned every bridge I had left. But I also left with something I hadn't possessed in months: clarity. Elena and Vanessa had played the game perfectly, turning my friends against me while positioning themselves as the victims. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd left me with nothing left to lose. The plan came to me gradually over the next 2 weeks, like pieces of a puzzle clicking into place. Elena and Vanessa had destroyed my marriage and friendships through careful manipulation of information and social pressure. If I wanted to beat them, I'd have to use their own methods against them. The key insight came when I realized that everything they'd accomplished depended on controlling the narrative. Elena was the wronged wife, driven to infidelity by an emotionally abusive husband. Vanessa was the supportive sister, helping her sibling escape a toxic marriage. As long as that story held, they were untouchable. But what if the story changed? I started by doing what I should have done months earlier. I hired a private investigator. Marcus Chen, no relation to my former friend Mike, was a former police detective who specialized in matrimonial cases. He was expensive, but I figured it was worth the cost if it meant getting my life back. I need to know everything, I told him during our first meeting. The affair, the timeline, the places they meet, everything. Marcus was a thin, methodical man in his 50s who took notes in a small leather book. "What's your end goal here? Divorce proceedings? Custody issues?" "Justice," I said. He looked up from his notes. "That's not a legal term." "Then let's call it truth. I want the truth." It took Marcus 3 weeks to compile a comprehensive report, and what he found exceeded even my worst expectations. Elena's affair with Marcus the artist had been going on for 6 months, not 3. It had started before she began complaining about our marriage, which meant her dissatisfaction was a justification for the affair, not the cause of it. More importantly, Vanessa hadn't just introduced Elena to Marcus. She'd been actively encouraging the affair from the beginning. The private investigator had photos of the 3 of them together at restaurants, art galleries, and Vanessa's penthouse. He had credit card records showing that Vanessa had paid for hotel rooms where Elena and Marcus met. He even had audio recordings of phone conversations where Vanessa coached Elena on what to tell me. But the most damaging evidence was something I never would have discovered on my own. Vanessa was having an affair, too, with a married city councilman named Robert Hayes. The affair had been going on for over a year, and Hayes had been using his position to help Vanessa secure favorable zoning permits for her gallery expansion. That was the ammunition I needed. I spent the next week carefully planning my counterattack. The key was timing and audience. I needed to expose both women simultaneously in a forum where their denials would seem desperate and their lies would be obvious. The opportunity came in the form of the annual Millfield Community Foundation Gala, a black tie event that drew the city's social elite. Elena would be there with Marcus, Vanessa would be there with her married councilman, and most importantly, all of our former friends would be there to witness the show. I bought a table for 8 and invited 7 people who had reason to dislike Elena or Vanessa. Contractors who'd been stiffed on payments, business partners who'd been betrayed, ex-friends who'd been discarded when they were no longer useful. I didn't tell them what I was planning, just that it would be an evening they'd never forget. The gala was held at the Grand Millfield Hotel, a restored 1920s building downtown. I arrived early and positioned myself where I could watch the entrance. Elena arrived at 7:30, stunning in a red dress, with Marcus beside her in an ill-fitting tuxedo. They were followed 10 minutes later by Vanessa and Councilman Hayes, who maintained a careful distance from each other in public. I waited until after dinner, when the crowd was relaxed and the wine had been flowing freely. Then I stood up and walked to the podium where the evening's speakers had been making their presentations. "Excuse me," I said into the microphone. "I'd like to make a brief announcement." The ballroom gradually quieted as people turned to look at me. I could see Elena at her table, her face pale with shock. Vanessa was half standing, as if she was considering making a run for the exit. "My name is David Patterson, and I want to talk to you tonight about truth." I pressed a button on the remote in my pocket, and the large screens around the room that had been showing the Foundation's promotional video switched to a photo of Elena and Marcus entering a hotel room. Gasps echoed through the ballroom. 6 months ago, my wife Elena began an affair with Marcus Rivera, an artist represented by Morrison Gallery. For months I was told that I was paranoid, controlling, and emotionally abusive for suspecting that something was wrong in my marriage. Another button press brought up photos of Vanessa and Councilman Hayes in intimate conversation at a restaurant. What I didn't know was that the affair was being facilitated and encouraged by Elena's sister, Vanessa Morrison, who was using my wife's situation to cover for her own affair with married city councilman Robert Hayes. The room erupted in shocked murmurs. I could see Hayes trying to push through the crowd toward the exit, but my hired security team was already blocking the doors. "But it gets better," I continued, advancing to the next slide, which showed financial records. Ms. Morrison used her relationship with Councilman Hayes to secure illegal zoning variances for her gallery expansion in exchange for campaign contributions that were actually bribes. Elena was on her feet now, shouting something I couldn't hear over the noise of the crowd. Marcus had abandoned her and was trying to disappear into the crowd. "The most interesting part," I said, raising my voice to carry over the commotion, "is how they turn my friends against me. Let me share some of the text messages where Vanessa Morrison coordinated a campaign to isolate me socially while Elena established her victim narrative. The screens filled with screenshots of text conversations between Vanessa and various people, including Sandra Reeves and the wives of my former poker buddies. The messages showed a calculated effort to spread rumors about my supposed controlling behavior while positioning Elena as a victim who needed support and protection. Ladies and gentlemen, you've just witnessed a masterclass in psychological manipulation. Two women who destroyed a marriage, corrupted a public official, and poisoned an entire social circle through lies, gaslighting, and carefully orchestrated character assassination. I could see hotel security approaching the podium, but I had one more card to play. Oh, and Marcus Rivera, the great artist who stole my wife, he's not actually an artist. He's a part-time house painter who's been selling forged paintings through Morrison Gallery. The FBI will be very interested in those financial records. That last part wasn't entirely true. Marcus was a real artist, just not a very good one. But in the chaos of the moment, with everything else being revealed, it sounded plausible. Security reached me just as I stepped away from the podium. "That's okay, gentlemen. I'm done here." As they escorted me toward the exit, I could see the aftermath of my revelation spreading through the ballroom like wildfire. Elena was crying at her table, abandoned by Marcus and surrounded by people taking photos with their phones. Vanessa was in heated conversation with a group of city officials who were clearly not pleased with the bribery allegations. Councilman Hayes had disappeared entirely, but the most satisfying sight was my former friends, Mike, Jim, and Tony, standing in a cluster near the bar, their faces pale with shock as they realized how completely they'd been manipulated. As I reached the exit, I turned back for one last look at the chaos I'd created. Elena caught my eye across the crowded ballroom, and for a moment we stared at each other through the sea of shocked faces and raised phones. Then I smiled, tipped an imaginary hat in her direction, and walked out into the night. By morning, the story had exploded across social media and local news. The photos and documents I'd presented were being analyzed and verified by journalists. The FBI had indeed opened an investigation into the zoning corruption. Elena's real estate license was under review. Vanessa's gallery was facing multiple lawsuits from clients who'd purchased questionable artwork. My phone had been buzzing all morning with calls from reporters, lawyers, and former friends who suddenly wanted to apologize for doubting me. I ignored them all. There was only one call I answered, and it came at exactly noon. "You destroyed everything," Elena said, her voice hollow. "No," I replied. "I revealed everything. You destroyed it months ago when you decided to cheat on our marriage and then convince everyone it was my fault." "David, please, we can fix this. We can work it out." "There's nothing to work out, Elena. You made your choice. You chose Marcus over me, lies over truth, manipulation over honesty. Now you get to live with the consequences. I never meant for it to go this far." "Yes, you did. You and Vanessa planned every bit of this. You just didn't plan on getting caught." There was a long silence before she spoke again. "What happens now? Now you figure out how to rebuild your life without me, without Vanessa's schemes, and without the luxury of blaming someone else for your choices." "I loved you, David. I still love you." "No, Elena. You loved the security I provided. You loved having someone to blame when your life felt boring. But you never loved me enough to be honest with me, and you never loved me enough to end our marriage before starting a new relationship." I hung up and turned off my phone. 3 months later, the divorce was final. Elena got half of everything, as expected, but half of everything turned out to be less than she'd hoped since her legal fees had been substantial and her earning potential had been damaged by the scandal. Vanessa's gallery closed after the FBI investigation revealed a pattern of fraud and corruption. She moved to another state to start over. Marcus Rivera disappeared entirely after it was revealed that several of his paintings were indeed forgeries. Councilman Hayes resigned in disgrace and was later convicted of accepting bribes. My former friends tried to reconcile, but I wasn't interested. They'd shown their true character when I needed them most, and that wasn't something I could forget or forgive. I kept the house, got a new job with a tech company in the next town over, and slowly began building a new life. It was quieter than my old life, and lonelier, but it was honest. Sometimes, late at night, I wondered if I'd gone too far. If destroying Elena and Vanessa so completely had made me as bad as they were. But then I remembered the months of gaslighting, the systematic destruction of my friendships, the lies and manipulation and calculated cruelty, and I realized that I'd simply given them exactly what they'd given me. The only difference was that I'd been better at it. Elena had wanted excitement and passion in her life. Well, she'd certainly gotten it, just not in the way she'd expected. And as for me, I'd learned that sometimes the best revenge isn't getting mad or getting even. Sometimes the best revenge is simply telling the truth.